Welcome back to another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. My name is Patrick Lyons. I'm one of your co-hosts, and I'm here with my friends and colleagues and partners in crime, Patsy Freeman. Patsy, welcome to you.
Thank you. Glad to be here today.
Good to see your shining face. And our other partner in crime, Leb Tannenbaum. Leb, welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, Patrick. Happy to be here.
Yeah. And it's interesting, talking about partners in crime, maybe I shouldn't say that with our guest who makes it a living preventing, at least cybercrime. So our guest today on the podcast is Aaron Warner, who is the founder and CEO of ProCircular. ProCircular is a cybersecurity and compliance firm that provides guidance to organizations looking to improve their security readiness, meet regulatory commitments, and address cybersecurity threats. Now, we've got the honor of spending 2 episodes with Aaron. This is part 1. There will be an episode to follow this one where we're going to ask Aaron to wear the hat of industry expert, covering cybersecurity issues that clearly stress every CEO in the universe. But today's episode, we're going to ask Aaron to don the founder and CEO hat and talk about what it's like to lead a scaling company with a fast-growing team in a high-tech industry. Aaron, welcome to the Frustrated CEO podcast.
Thank you, Patrick, Patsy, Love. It's nice to meet you guys. Thank you for having me on the show.
Of course. I am excited about these. I know my colleagues are as well. Now, Aaron, I want to talk a little bit about, I know sometimes the hearing about all the awards that we win can make us uncomfortable, but just perusing the ProCircular website, you can see there are a lot of really cool awards that the company has won in the last handful of last couple of years. Awards like Coolest Place to Work, Fastest Growing Company, Service Provider of the Year, twice winning the award for Best Place for Working Parents, and even winning Company of the Year. What are you doing as CEO, as leader, you and your leadership team, what are you doing intentionally that is getting that kind of recognition?
We're really proud of all of those awards. They come from a number of different sources. And, I think that the thing that they underline most is the quality of the folks that we've brought together. As much as I would like to take credit for the culture that we have, the environment that we have, all I really have done is set the opportunity for that environment to thrive up. Everybody else has done the heavy lifting. So whenever we have a policy question about let's talk about paternity leave, or when we talk about, things to do with the culture, summer hours would be an example. Even the negative stuff. If we have to talk about layoffs, if we have to talk about times when cash is tight, that's when the culture makes the real difference in what we do. So yeah, it's nice to receive all of that recognition for the work that we've done on our culture. But everybody says that your culture is the thing that you live and die by, that that the core values are important. Back in the day, I worked in biotech for a long time. We did a word frequency analysis search of our competitors because we were all nerds. We looked at the companies that we kind of wanted to be when we grew up, and we did a word frequency analysis on their core values. And the 5 values that showed up most often were the same core values as Enron. So we're like, well, having a core value that says we're going to be strong supporters of our community, or that we're going to be ethical, like putting that on your masthead doesn't do a damn thing, right? So you have to live it. And it's an everyday part of what you do. But I think part of it is starting with descriptions that resonate with people. So yeah, it's our primary, number one core value is it's about people. And we really take that seriously. It's in our interview process. It's in our review process. So everybody, they have the things that they do as a job, and they have the way they interact with their colleagues at work. And that's all based on core values. Even our exit interviews. Like, how do you think we can do better about these core values? Which of these things, do you, very jaded, upset person who's no longer with the company, what do you think we're getting wrong? Because it's a great time to ask that question. And they probably have, no matter what the circumstances, their opinion on that subject matters. So we ask ourselves about our culture a lot. We put a lot of time into our culture, but there is a business strategy to it as well. I work in cybersecurity. I operate a firm that is in one of the most competitive industries in the world right now. Competition for talent is insane. I heard from an intern last week that Google was paying their interns like $47 an hour. Interns, $47 an hour. I was thinking we were doing great paying all of our interns at all, because you didn't used to pay interns. I thought we were doing great with that, but apparently Google's offering almost $50 an hour. So, my job in cybersecurity, I don't get to decide who works at the company. Like that in cyber, and particularly in the technical part of what we do, those folks choose where they want to work. And they tend to travel in packs, right? If you have an engineering team, there's a good chance that 2 or 3 of those people have worked together before. So they move around together a lot. All I can really do as a CEO is to set up a culture and an environment where they choose to work in a place. And that has a lot to do with the things that you're talking about, giving time for parents to be parents, being flexible with the schedule that you need to have. And ours is a chaotic world. So sometimes a week is 80 hours, and sometimes it's okay if a week is 20. There's give and take, but that begins and ends with the culture at the organization. It was, I think a lot of us at ProCircular, this was our chance to get it right. A lot of us have worked other places, and we're like, this time, this is our thing. We're going to do this a little differently. And we loaded a lot of that energy into the core values. It's a big part of our thing.
Can I ask Aaron, how many core values? I mean, I'm thinking of our listeners, like, since the first one was unique and wonderful. Yeah,
it's funny. We debate about that, whether is it 5, is it 7? We have 7.
Okay.
The first one is it's about people. The second one is actually we're all nerds at ProCircular. So it's fear is the mind killer, which is a Frank Herbert, like a Dune reference. So fear is the mind killer is because we're in cybersecurity, right? Everybody in our industry likes to go out and scare everybody to death. They tell you you're screwed if you don't buy our thing, and here's the price of the thing that we want to sell you. Fear is a really temporary motivator, and it's not a particularly effective way to get things done. And when bad things happen in cybersecurity, a clear mind is a good thing. So fear is the mind killer is another of our core values. Strong opinions lightly held. So that is cybersecurity, and I'm present company included, tends to attract women and men who are typically very A-type. Like there's a lot of kind of hard chargers in our line of work, people who like to run to the fire. And those folks often have very strong opinions, right? I'm one of them, but it's okay to have strong opinions, but when you come to a discussion and we're working through something, bring data with you. Let's approach this with logic and reason. And it's cool that you're passionate about it, but keep an open mind, because somebody else may have a better way to do the thing that's in front of us, right? Quality over speed, speed over cost is another one. And my bankers hate this one. The quality is a super important part of what we do. In cybersecurity, there is not a lot of room for error. Particularly when we do like incident response, the last thing you want to do is miss something and have a bad guy back in 2 weeks later. So quality over speed and speed over cost. Cool heads, warm hearts. is another core value of ours. A lot of times our role in a given situation isn't technical. It's about bringing the calm. Like you want a calm approach, especially if, I mean, in an incident, like if you have a CEO is running around feeling violated, the CFO feels like you're going to go bankrupt. It's 2:30 in the morning. Nobody's eaten anything but pizza, and they've all drunk 2 liters of Coke, and everybody's running around with their hair on fire because this hacker is threatening their company and the hundreds of people that depend on them. Like, it's a very high stress situation. Cool heads, warm hearts. You need to have empathy for the people that we serve and with each other. It gets, are things intense? People argue about, is this what's happening or is that what's happening? Same thing internally. Cool heads, warm hearts, respect, RESPECT. We even have the little picture of Aretha in the logo. We treat people how we want to be treated. Another thing you find in cyber is that some of those A-type personalities don't like to take the time it takes to be polite to one another. I don't have a lot of room. I don't have a lot of patience for that. Like, we need to be able, this is important, and we need to be able to talk to each other respectfully. And everyone here is smart, so nobody needs to one up one another. Let's treat each other with respect. And then the last one is tomorrow just happened, which is, it actually includes a quote from Lennon, life's what happens when you're busy making other plans. So tomorrow in cybersecurity is always a thing. There's always some new challenge. There's always some new tech. There's some new threat out there. We always have to be forward looking, because the minute we get comfortable with the way things are, the ship passes you. So yeah, Leb, there are 7 of them. We debate about whether that is too many or too few. We actually do. At HR used to go around, and if people could rattle off all 7, they would get like $5. It's just a way to make it fun. But those values show up all over the place at ProCircular. You'll hear people argue, use these core values to argue their point. We did a big rollout of a big monitoring thing, and the engineers in that group are like, Aaron, quality over speed, speed over cost. I need another month to get this right. Like, it's not ready, and you aren't going to be happy if it rolls out like this. I know you don't want that, but quality over speed, speed over cost. Like, I need an extra month. That kind of thing is common inside of the firm.
We literally just did our last episode was on core values. And it was exactly that, is how do you bring them to life? So everything you just said is I mean, it's right in line with what, I mean, again, we just did a whole episode, and I was actually sitting here impressed that you could rattle them off. And not only could you rattle them off, you rattle them off in order, because I actually have them up in a website.
That's cheating.
Because I wanted to see them in preparation for today. So you rattle them off in order, and you actually were able to elaborate on, give more than just repeat them, and give examples of them in action. And we often say, it comes out of a lot of culture work by Dan Dennison. We often say that the leader, the single greatest impact on any organization is the senior leader. And I'm amazed at how many senior leaders don't know their core values. Can't turn them off. They advocate that to HR, and then they're not advocates of it. They don't carry it.
My boss, my last boss, and I love him dearly, and I owe him a debt of gratitude I will never be able to repay. But Joe was a MD, PhD. He was a professor of biochemistry at the medical school. He's an absolutely brilliant man, genius in every sense of the word. Joe did not dupe people. He had this amazing ability. I'm jealous as hell. He had this amazing ability. It didn't occur to him how others might feel about him. It didn't affect him at all. And I mean, like, in an amazing way, and sometimes an infuriating way. Like, we would have a very important client come to town because we're in Iowa. So most of our clients, when I worked in biotech, are in San Diego or San Francisco or Boston. And they'd come in and we'd wait 5 hours for Joe to get to work. Like, where the hell is he? Joe would come in and he totally unaffected. Didn't bother him a bit. He was busy. He had other things to work on. And so some of the time that we put into core values, I think, was spent to offset some of that, because we as the senior management team knew this stuff was not going to come from Joe. Like, Joe doesn't think about, Joe's a chemist. If you want to go talk about mRNA or custom oligonucleotide manufacture, Joe's your guy. If you want to talk about strong opinions lightly held, probably that's kind of fell on us to take care of. So that's probably where, we're all to a certain degree formed by our past, right? That had a lot to do with it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, well, number one, I was already attracted to your company when you went through all 7 of them and the way you spoke about them.
Thank you.
So I do want to say that. I guess because of, again, our listeners, are there any gems you can share from exit interviews for people who just maybe realized, I just can't live this way, or it's usually in the reverse, like hire for a culture fit. It sounds like people who might exit might enter and say, oh no, I don't fit, or I can't live all this.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. We have, I'm just thinking, and I have to make some kind of generalizations, I guess, but in the technical folks, sometimes those exit interviews have translated into, like, why can't I be myself? And again, I hate to keep going back to this, but the last place I worked, we had another core value: be yourself unless you're a jerk. And I swear to God, it's probably still up on their website. Some people, if you define a culture and you're serious about it, some people aren't, by their very nature, going to be interested in participating in it. So if they're, we've had some folks from like Philly or Manhattan who they scream and swear, and that's just how they communicate, right? That's how they get things done. And I'm not saying that's wrong or right. They accomplish quite a bit in those places, but it's just not a great fit for us. And it tends to twist all of the other employees up. So, we'll hear that in an exit interview. I think most recently, so we do consulting work, and having come from manufacturing, like a product manufacturing world, it's a very different world. There's a difference between people who can be a consultant and serve 100 clients, right? Or 10, 20 different clients, as opposed to somebody who can serve one really, really well, right? Like, there's a CIO and then there's like a virtual CIO. I think that's probably part of it. We've had a number of people who are really good at their specific discipline, but in a situation where you have to support multiple clients and you need to be able to unplug yourself from one client and plug yourself into another, that can be challenging for some folks. So we've seen a little bit of attrition along those lines. But very rarely is it like, I mean, they're kind of hard to argue with. Like, I just want to go scare everybody isn't a thing that we're going to hear. I've heard it before. Like, why don't you guys use fear? It's a good question to ask, right? If I don't know the answer to the question, then it's not a strategy. It's just something I thought of, right? So it's a valid question. But yeah, in exit interviews, we hear things like that. Just to be like totally honest, since this is CEO podcast and you want things that frustrate me, I've mentioned it before. Pay differentials in cybersecurity are nuts. So I recently lost a 27-year-old employee to Amazon. I believe that individual was north of $150,000 a year with our firm. He signed for $300,000.
Oh wow!
Yeah. And it's not a senior position. This is, I mean, it's a good position, but it isn't like he's not like the director of Amazon, whatever. He's just a really solid employee in that team. We've had that happen. That's one of the big impacts of COVID, right? All this work from home stuff broke down the geographic boundaries between the Midwest and either coast. And, you know, again, I don't mean to carp about Google paying interns $50 an hour, but that's what people in San Francisco are used to being paid. That is not what people in Minneapolis or Des Moines are used to being paid. And when that's available, it can lead to some difficult, difficult decisions for people.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yep.
Yeah, if there's a primary reason that we lose technical talent, it's probably to do with money, and it's usually when some larger company shows up with a $150,000 a year raise, right? That's hard to turn. If you've got a family, or if you're just cool and 27 and want to make $300 a year, you know, I can't knock them for that.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
So how do you help your employees, especially through the CEO, learn how to build relationships? It's probably not indicative in the industry you're in to begin with. And then as you get into some other generations, it's not as prevalent. So how do you support them to learn how to build relationships?
With junior employees, that's a thing we've talked about a little bit lately. I think setting them up for success, an early win. So it gets tricky because I don't want to talk about specific individuals, but we have, when somebody comes into the environment, especially if they're not a big extrovert, right? Not everybody in cybersecurity is loud and like me runs around and does podcasts and stuff. A lot of them don't like the light of day very much. They do it to be behind the scenes, right?
Which is probably the predominant, right?
There's a really good mix of people who don't like to be, they don't like their picture out. They don't like their, so it depends a little bit upon who you're talking about. But I think in general, especially for those introverts, if you can get a situation where they get to win or show their skills or capabilities in front of their colleagues, people reach out to them and they are more comfortable reaching out to other people. I know that's a little circuitous as far as the route to, I'd love to be able to tell you, like, I have this great training program that will help get people to open up or to communicate with one another. But I've found shared success is a really great way to get people to sort of open up and communicate with each other. You find little things, little projects that you can put people on together where they get to know one another. I found that to be pretty effective. I also like, we do the buddy system. So when you come on, you get assigned an individual so that, presumably somebody with more tenure who can tell you, like, who do I ask about X, Y, or Z, or what does this core value actually mean? Like, I don't understand that, that kind of thing. Really opening up their opportunities to communicate with others. Everybody has kind of a different style of that, but eventually you're going to get it right. And people like to share in success together. I think that brings them together.
Great, thanks. Yeah, worked with a fintech company. Their sprint teams, and one of the team members never liked to have his camera on. And we were doing kind of and everybody else says, "Oh man, we want to see your face." He goes, "Oh, I live in such a messy house." They're like, "We don't care what your house looks like. We want to see you." And he just kind of melted, and he kept his camera on ever since then.
It's so funny, Patsy. As an IT guy, and I've been at this for a little bit, all those Polycom cameras that are in the back of like every conference room, those black, every IT guy tried to force everybody to use for like a decade. And like, look, I don't want to be on camera. And that thing doesn't work half the time anyway. Fast forward post-COVID, right? Now it's weird when the camera isn't on. I spent 10 years trying to get people to turn the damn camera on, and now it's a thing. If it's like, what are they up to over there? Like, the camera's not on. It's funny to me how quickly that changed. That's, one of a number of things that COVID transformed is like, we like to see each other again.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and it's very different to say, turn your camera on versus we miss you. We want to see you.
Yeah.
Which is the relationship piece. So
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lev.
I was just going to say, so what does it, and I know no day is average, especially in cybersecurity, but what does the working environment look like? And again, thinking of the listener saying, okay, but are they hybrid? Are people together? How much are they dispersed all over the Midwest? Those kinds of questions, because everybody's grappling with how to create this great culture that you've somehow been able to be recognized for.
It's tricky, and it's not my default setting. I, like many people, grew up in a world. I spent every Thursday, and I swear I'm not making this up. I spent every Thursday from roughly 4 in the afternoon until 2:30 in the morning in conference room C at Integrated DNA. 15 years of that. I'm used to solving problems with a whiteboard and a conference room.
Yeah.
So go back to March of 2020, I worked in biotech. I actually worked with the CDC a whole lot. So I know more than the average bear about like pandemics. I knew a bad thing was coming from conversations with colleagues in the industry. And so I went to our head of project management, and I said, Maddie, I think we may not be able to come to work for a little bit. I think that's what's coming. But I don't know how that's going to affect us. So let's practice. So let's try and take, how much time could we, like next week, could we just not come into the office? And she's like, oh, Aaron, no. So I'll go work on it. She came back. She said, we could be 3 days. I can give you 3 days. I'm like, Maddie, this is exactly the reason we need to practice this, because we can't, if we're not allowed in the building, we just can't come into the building. So second week in March of 2020, we went on pandemic practice, and we never came back. So now I'd love to tell you that we have some beautifully articulated policy that helps to people to understand when it is and isn't the right time to be at the office and whatever. Every effort we've made to try and build structure around that has failed, to be totally honest. I'm involved with we'll call it a group with a bunch of other CEOs. And these are CEOs of much larger companies. I mean, by $1 billion, $2 billion, $5 billion. And I listened to these 3 CEOs on stage talk about, this is a year ago. Man, when everybody gets back into the office and everything gets back to normal, then we can get back to work. And I'm like, you guys are deluding yourselves. Like they hadn't figured out, like, that isn't up to you anymore. Like, you don't get to decide that. People will not want to work. They won't work for your firm if that's going to be your approach, or the best people won't anyway. Yeah. So we've tended to be pretty laissez-faire about that. There, when we do in-person stuff, like that's a time we're pretty explicit about, like, we would like you to come and establish face-to-face relationships, but we don't have really hard and fast rules around when you should and shouldn't be in the office. Some people really like coming in the office. Ironically, the younger folks in our firm really like coming into an office. It's mostly the middle-aged folks that are like, I'm going to be in maybe Mondays and maybe part of Fridays. I think that's pretty normal. That's close to what my schedule is, but I'm weird because I travel a lot for work. So my Monday through Friday could have me in 3 cities a lot of the time.
For clients?
Yes. For clients, we're growing in Minneapolis. We're growing throughout the Midwest. So usually to meet up with clients, or I do a lot of presenting. We like to share what we know. So I do a lot of presenting, and that's a big part of it as well. And then legislative work. I've done quite a bit of legislative work with Technology Association of Iowa and that stuff usually brings me to the State House or DC most recently.
So actually, there are two topics in there I want to talk about. First is the growth. You were just talking about growing in Minneapolis. You have grown. ProCircular has grown a lot. I mean, it's, as near as I can tell, at least 40% in a relatively short period of time, perhaps even more. What kind of strain does that put on the system? What kind of strain?
Would you believe me if I told you that we have grown as slowly as we can get away with? It's true. Yeah. Cybersecurity it's different in that there aren't the same kinds of constraints that you're used to. And it's going to take me a sec to get that right. But when you can do anything, when you can choose any part of a market to attack and have a fairly reasonable chance of success, it's kind of like saying you could do anything, pick, right? It's a different problem than I think I can address this little part of this market that only has these 20 competitors in it and there are constraints and all of that. I'll give an example. We talk about cannabis cybersecurity. Those guys they make money hand over fist. As long as you're comfortable being paid in cash or Bitcoin, which I could care less about, it's fine. They have every threat actor in the world, right? The cannabis world has the Zetas cartel in Mexico after them. It's a very technical organization. When they're not hanging people off of bridges, they hire hackers and stuff. So you can imagine like the cannabis world is attacked from bad guys, from all the usual fraudsters and Russians and whatever. I'd be very surprised if they don't have some government overreach, like ATF and DEA and so forth, likes to know what those guys are up to. And I can't tackle that industry because hospitals, because K-12, because banks and financial institutions,
Right.
I have this kind of known quantity right in front of me. It's not that going into the cannabis, going in that direction would be a wrong thing. Somebody could start a whole business and have every reason to think they're going to be successful at it. It's just not for us. We're too busy doing other things. So a lot of what we put our time into is what we choose not to do, as opposed to what we're going to do. So our growth is throttled a little bit on that quality over speed over cost piece of it. The other thing, and this has been really apparent just in the last 6 months, growth is a mixed bag, and your labor tends to grow as a step function, or your expenses tend to grow as a step function, where there's a curve associated with revenue. Hopefully, it's a positive curve, right? But we've outpaced that revenue curve. This last 6 months has been weird. We're getting a lot of like, not right now. It's not no, it's not right now. So from a cash flow perspective, we've had some major challenges recently. We've had to tighten our belts a lot. And so I'd say that we've grown about as fast as we can afford to. We also, and this is the big difference, we don't have private equity funding. We don't have venture capital funding. It's all been traditional. It's the money that I made when I left biotech, when I sold some of my shares off from the company that I worked for last time. So I've bootstrapped this thing. It's funny that you say that, because our growth has been fast from an objective perspective, but internally it feels like I know we could be growing faster than this, but if we're going to do this right, things take time. Yeah.
That's good. The other question I had, thank you. The other question I had, you talked about presenting a lot, presenting locally, big time in Iowa, and you also mentioned DC. We were talking a little bit before before the camera started rolling for this podcast. We're talking about imposter syndrome, right? You made I'll let you make the statement again about imposter syndrome, but so often the saying that I've heard is the two loneliest jobs in the universe are pastor and CEO, right? Because you always have to look like you have it together. You can't ever admit that, man, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm in over my head, or how are we going to get out of this? So you made a comment before the camera started rolling, and I asked if we could talk to you about it here, but about being at the White House, right? Some might look at that and say, "Dude, you've made it," whereas in your mind, it's like, well, yeah, not so much.
It's a tricky, yeah. So I was honored recently as the Small Business Person of the Year for the state of Iowa. So the SBA picks one person per state, and it's a big thing. And we got to go to the White House, and the president and Kamala Harris gave a nice talk and thanked us. And I got to meet 54 other people who are just as crazy as I am. They're all this whole room full of people who are from all the states in the union, every one of them put their house up as collateral for some god awful loan to get a company up and running. It was a very interesting experience. They did the ceremony in the Rose Garden, and I think the last administration actually pulled the roses out of the Rose Garden. So this was the first time there were roses back in the rose. It was a really wonderful day. It was beautiful. If you really want to, I think this is what you're getting at, Patrick. If you really want to test your imposter syndrome, have the president of the United States tell you you're doing a good job. Like, there is no further extreme than like, how could that possibly be true? You have the wrong guy, you have the wrong company, you probably have the wrong state. There's no chance that that's true. So if you want to test the depths of imposter syndrome typically comes from trauma, early like childhood trauma. A lot of people who've had rough childhoods really struggle with it. I'm like that too. It's a real thing for sure. It gets in the way, but a lot of things, as long as you recognize it for what it is, you can manage it, right? If I don't feel like I deserve any of this. It feels weird for me to be on a podcast talking about, the frustrated part, I'm 100% with you. But the CEO thing, I'll never get used to. So it was a really interesting experience when you're sitting in the Rose Garden, true story, and the president is saying nice things about you and the work that your people have done, and all you can think about is like, God, I wonder what July is going to look like. Like, I don't know if this client is going to get this statement of work in on time, and I could have a cash flow. And like, those are the things that I'm thinking about while they're talking. And you feel like you're supposed to be enjoying the moment. Like, you're cognizant of the fact that this is special, right? But, it's probably there's got to be somebody better for this than me. It's something like everyone. I've got more than my fair share of idiosyncrasies. It's a thing that you kind of have to manage, right? But that lights it up, man. Let me tell you, you walk into the White House, you're like, oh, sooner or later they're going to figure out I don't belong here.
Thank you. I think I just appreciate that, because I know that's something that a listener can resonate with. So thank you for the candidness.
Yeah.
And I want to squeeze one more quick question here on that note. How do you, you've talked about a lot of things, which I'm sure many of our listeners are going, yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, the labor, differential, da, 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 da. And I can even relate to the imposter syndrome aspect. But you talked about it's something you have to manage.
Yeah.
How do you manage that yourself? How do you go back to what you know is right for you and embrace all that, self-talk that every single one of us does?
Yeah.
So you stay focused.
How do you stay? I don't do. It's more about the journey than it is about getting to a place. I think I don't do it particularly well. In full transparency, my head doesn't stop ever, so it is a little bit of a challenge. The few things that I know that help, there are countless like breathing apps on the App Store. So just taking 5 minutes before work to breathe. Something that simple can have a really major
Good.
effect. I've also found that, you know, I'm a totally open book with people. I don't feel like being the tough, strong guy gets me anything. And in fact, I think that the team and our company, it's probably part of the culture, responds better to me when I'm honest with them. Like, look, I don't know the right way to solve this problem, but I've got some of the smartest people I can find here in this room. We'll figure this out, right? Like, I think being honest about it saves you a whole lot of trying to hide how you really feel or how, you know, how things, the truth of the matter. I think I spent many years trying to be the calm, like more collected, always putting on a good face and so forth. I don't know how effective I was at any of that, but I do know that it feels more genuine when I can have faults and I don't always have the right answer. You know, I found that people warm up to that a lot better than me trying to pretend like I have everything under control, because I don't. I don't. And in cyber, anyone who's telling you they've got this whole thing figured out,
Don't believe him. Running the other
yeah,
direction.
I wouldn't buy that completely. If they do, have them give me a call, please.
Great.
Let
I
me grab
appreciate your honesty. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions before we round third and head home with a let's get practical for this episode?
Nope.
Plenty more, but I think it's time.
No, Aaron, we could go on and on. So thank you for sharing
My
your
pleasure.
as Aaron Warner, the CEO of ProCircular. This is the part of every episode where we somewhat recap and try to give key points, key takeaways from this episode that a listener can implement in his or her business to grow as a leader, to make inroads and strides in whatever, in any of the areas that we've talked about. So, Aaron, how about we'll model it for you, and then unless you want to go first, we'll model it for you.
Go for it.
Okay, we'll model it for you, and then please do chime in with what advice would you give a CEO or a senior leader for how to be just even incrementally better, 1% better.
I'll give it a shot.
All right, so Lev or Patsy, who wants to go?
Go ahead, Leb.
Okay. But there's a lot here. I would say one of the let's get practicals is find what helps you slow down and bring your authentic self.
I think realizing that it's okay if you don't have it all figured out, and that employees know you better than you think they do. So if you think you're getting away with like whatever, they know damn well what you're up to. You're not as tricky as you might think you are. I've never been able to pull anything off that my employees haven't figured out. So why try? Just flip the script a little bit and just try and be open and honest. And it's okay to be, transparent, vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. One more I have is recognize what's in your control and what isn't.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of, someone who gets $150,000 pay raise if they leave and take another position somewhere else.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's a priority question, right? It's where are you in your life and your journey? What's most important to you? And, Lab, to your point, what is within your control and what's outside of it? And, you control the things that to be true. That's I think admitting that you don't control everything is a pretty important step in finding your way through this world. At least that's been my experience. Yeah.
Beautiful. Patsy, what do you have?
I have that it's as important to be intentional and choose what not to do, what clients not to take, as it is as important to choose what clients to take.
Yeah, it's hard.
It is hard.
It's difficult,
Yeah.
especially early on when you will take any form of revenue that shows up in front of you, right? Like
Right.
I wash windows, clean floors, like whatever you need if I can make payroll. So yeah, saying no is or not right now is really challenging.
Yep. But
Yeah.
you were pretty clear about that, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So growth, the right kind of growth, kind of on the heels of that, takes time and constant awareness.
Mhm.
So be very intentional consistently about your growth.
Yeah. And I am hit or miss on that point. I'm impatient and sometimes I get ahead of myself but yeah.
All right, I'll share two that I thought were really impactful to me. Aaron, you early on you said you don't get to choose who works for you. Your people choose whether or not they want to work there, and so all you get to do, you said, all you get to do is create a culture that people might want to work in, but then it's their choice.
Yep. Absolutely. Especially in cyber where everybody who works for me is one phone call away from their next gig.
I might argue with the war for talent that everybody's facing. I mean, everybody's facing that in some way, shape, or form. So, and then the second one I had is, I love this. Fear is a temporary motivator. It's not the way to get things done. Be solution oriented, not a fear monger.
Yeah. Fear will get you what you need today, but people get tone deaf to it really quickly.
Yeah. I thought that was good.
Thank
Aaron,
you.
what might you add that we left out that a CEO should or could implement in their business?
I think that being honest with yourself is the thing. And it's honestly, you have so many preconceptions about what a CEO is when you go into this job. I was a CIO before this and a CTO and every weird form of vice president before that. So the job of CIO is very different from the job of CEO. The CEO gig is more, it's quite a bit lonelier. It is a lonely place sometimes. But your ability, the one thing I guess as frustrated as I tend to be, and I'm frustrated a lot, it is an amazing opportunity to make the right kind of change and improvement to the world. You don't get, I feel really lucky, really blessed to have a bunch of people who trust me with this degree of control. And what I can give in return for that is to try and make things better. I have enough control that I can usually shortcut a process that leads to people moving forward or solving a problem or even just enjoying their personal life. Like that's the thing about being a CEO I really enjoy, that I don't have to ask permission to do the right thing. And that makes all of the sleepless nights and the imposter syndrome and all of this other garbage that goes along for the ride, it makes it all worthwhile. It really, really does.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, that's good.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful. All right. I think we have beaten enough out of you, Aaron, for one episode. Hopefully,
I feel for whoever has to edit this thing.
No, it's going to be great. Listener, thank you for sticking with us to the end of another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed Aaron as much as I know we did. Aaron, thank you. It is work, right? It's fun, but it's work as well.
Yeah.
So listener, please check out our website, thefrustratedceo.com, where you can find this episode's Let's Get Practical, the thing we just did, as well as all of our previous Let's Get Practicals and all the prior episodes. Please like and share and subscribe to the podcast. Feel free to connect with any or all of us on LinkedIn. In fact, maybe that's a question, Aaron, before we sign off. If someone is interested in connecting with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn or you can find the firm at ProCircular.com. we're always happy to help out.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. And yes, stick around, or maybe I should say come back in 2 weeks for the next episode where Aaron takes off the CEO hat and puts on the industry thought leader hat. We'll do an entire episode on how you as a CEO can and should be preparing for cybersecurity.
Hackers and dark web and all the good stuff, right?
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm looking forward to that. That's it. Leb, Patsy, thank you so much.
Thank you as well.
Over here.
Thank you, Aaron. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yep. And we will see you again next time on the Frustrated CEO Podcast.